Welcome to our channel. Today we are going to study a part of biology known as Mendel's laws of inheritance. We are going to study this part with questions and answers for a better understanding. The first question we have here says, Mendel performed hybridization by transferring pollen from the dash of the male plant to the female ova. A. Stigma. B. Anther. C. Seed. D. Stem. In this question, the correct answer is B. Anther. So there is a great scientist called Gregor Mendel. This Gregor Mendel is a geneticist. He did a genetic study, or he did a genetic research, and during his genetic research, he performed hybridization by transferring pollen from the anther of the plant he worked with to the female ova, or to the stigma of the plants, in order to get offspring. So this scientist is one of the great scientists that contributed immensely in the field of genetics. The next question says, Mendel conducted a genetic research using dash A. Amoeba. B. Pea plants. C. Cotton. D. Palm trees. In this question, the correct answer is B. Pea plants. This great scientist called Gregor Mendel conducted a genetic research by using plants called pea plants, and he did a lot of studies with the pea plants and observed how traits move from parent to offspring. So this Gregor Mendel is a scientist that laid good foundation of genetics for other researchers. The next question says, in an experiment, a black and white true breeding mice were mated and the offspring produced were all gray. This indicates an inheritance pattern called dash A. Codominance. B. Incomplete dominance. C. Multiple alleles. D. None of the above. In this question, the correct answer is B. Incomplete dominance. So in this experiment where a black and white true breeding mice were mated and the offspring produced were all gray, this type of experiment indicates an inheritance pattern known as incomplete dominance. The next question says, when through breeding or homozygous organisms that differ for a certain trait are crossed, all the offspring will be dash for that trait. A. Homozygous for that trait. B. Heterozygous for that trait. C. Monozygous for that trait. D. None of the above. In this question, the correct answer is B. Heterozygous for that trait. So studies have shown that when true breeding or homozygous organisms that differ for a certain trait are crossed, all the offspring that will be produced will be heterozygous for that trait. So Gregor Mendel is one of the scientists that did research in genetics and observed many things concerning how traits move from generation to generation. So in a situation where true breeding or homozygous organisms that differ for a certain trait are crossed, all the offspring that will be produced during that crossing will be heterozygous for that trait. The next question says, recessive letter alleles are only harmful in dash. A. Homozygotes. B. Heterozygotes. C. Air. D. Water. In this question, the correct answer is A. Homozygotes. When there is what we call recessive letter alleles, recessive letter alleles are those versions of genes that are harmful in homozygotes. Homozygotes are organisms that have two copies of these recessive alleles, and studies have shown that when an individual has two copies of recessive alleles or two alleles that are recessive, this recessive allele can cause the death of that organism. They are very harmful in such a way that they can cause the death of that organism. So recessive letter alleles are only harmful in homozygotes or in homozygote organisms. The next question says, dominant letter alleles are fatal in dash. A. Homozygotes. B. Heterozygotes. C. All of the above. D. None of the above. In this question, the correct answer is C. All of the above. Studies have shown that dominant letter alleles are harmful versions of genes. They are harmful genes that can affect homozygotes. They are also fatal to heterozygotes because they are dominant. So in this situation, they affect both the homozygotes and heterozygotes. The next question says, according to Mendel's law of inheritance, genes are inherited as pairs of dash. A. Alleles. B. Cytoplasm. C. Mitochondrion. D. Nucleus. In this question, the correct answer is A. Alleles. So, according to Mendel's findings, according to Mendel's discovery of how traits are controlled by genes, these genes are inherited as pairs of alleles, and Gregor Mendel made it clear that a pair of gene or this pair of alleles control a contrasting character in an organism. So genes are inherited as pairs of alleles, and these alleles control a trait or a particular trait in an organism. The next question says, during meiosis, the two alleles for a trait separate so that each gamete only carries one allele. This statement is called dash. A. Mendel's law of segregation of genes. B. Mendel's law of independent assortment of genes. C. Graham's law. D. Boy's law. In this question, the correct answer is A. Mendel's law of segregation of genes. Meiosis is a process that deals with cell division. So it's a process that gametes use for multiplication. So during meiotic division, the two alleles for a trait separate so that each gamete only carries one allele. This statement is Mendel's law of segregation of genes. Mendel made it clear in this law that genes separate during meiosis. in such a way that each gamete only carries one allele. The next question says, the law of independent assortment of genes is Mendel's law of inheritance. A. First law of inheritance. B. Second law of inheritance. C. Third law of inheritance. D. None of the above. In this question, the correct answer is B. Second law of inheritance. One of the laws of Gregor Mendel is law of independent assortment of genes, and this law, called law of independent assortment of genes, is Mendel's second law of inheritance. The next question says, when genes are located closely on the same chromosome, their alleles tend to be inherited together. This results in offspring ratios that dash Mendel's law of independent assortment of genes. A. Violates Mendel's law of independent assortment of genes. B. Comply with Mendel's law of independent assortment of genes. C. All of the above. D. None of the above. In this question, the correct answer is A. Violates Mendel's law of independent assortment of genes. Studies have shown that genes can be genes on the same chromosomes can be very close to each other in such a way that their alleles tend to be inherited together. So there is when genes are close to each other or close to one another on the same chromosome, studies have shown that their alleles, or there is a tendency of their alleles to be inherited together. And when this occurs, it will now result in offspring ratio that will violate Mendel's law of independent assortment of genes. The next question says, the high tendency of genes located close together on the same chromosome to be inherited together is best described as dash. A. Linkage. B. Chromatids. C. DNA. D. RNA. In this question, the correct answer is A. Linkage. This linkage is the tendency of genes located close together on the same chromosome to be inherited together. So the high tendency of genes located close together on the same chromosome to be inherited together is best described as linkage, and this linkage affects Mendel's law of independent assortment of genes seriously. The next question says, which of the Mendel's law of inheritance is better demonstrated through a dihybrid cross? A. Law of segregation of genes. B. Law of independent assortment of genes. C. All of the above. D. None of the above. In this question, the correct answer is B. Law of independent assortment of genes. This law of independent assortment of genes is a law, or is one of the laws of Mendel that is better demonstrated through a dihybrid cross. This great scientist called Gregor Mendel, came up with this law when he carried out a dihybrid cross and find out that genes have the ability of assorting independently. So through his experiments, after taking a record of the results of the experiments, he discovered that genes have the ability of assorting independently, and this law of independent assortment of genes is Mendel's second law, as we have said. The next question says, a cross between two organisms that are heterozygous for two different traits is best described as dash. A. Monohybrid cross. B. Dihybrid cross. C. Trihybrid cross. D. Tetrahybrid cross. In this question, the correct answer is B. Dihybrid cross. Dihybrid cross is a cross between two organisms that are heterozygous for two different traits. So, any cross between two organisms that are heterozygous for two different traits is known as dihybrid cross. And through this dihybrid cross, Mendel discovered many things concerning how genes control traits that move from generation to generation. The next question says, which of the following is a non-Mendelian inheritance? A. Incomplete dominance. B. Polygenic inheritance. C. Co-dominance. D. All of the above. In this question, the correct answer is D. All of the above. There are different inheritance patterns that does not follow Mendel's laws of inheritance, because Mendel's law of inheritance made it clear that a pair of genes, or Gregor Mendel made it clear that a pair of genes controls a character. So there are some inheritance patterns that violate Mendel's principles of inheritance. One of these inheritance pattern is incomplete dominance. We also have what we call polygenic inheritance, even co-dominance. All these options are non-Mendelian inheritance pattern because they don't follow Mendel's principles of inheritance. If this is the first time you are watching our video, if this is the first time you are joining this channel, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel so that you can study other topics that we have treated in many of our videos. You can also make your comments in this video.